The Effects of Time by Raymond Gaylord. Perspective on Human Permanence through literary analysis of the short stories There Will Come Soft Rain and Speech Sounds, written by Ray Bradbury and Octavia Butler. Many science fiction authors throughout history have addressed one of the most fundamental laws of nature. When something stops growing, it begins to decay. This occurs in all things. Authors have addressed this simple fact in their writing, whether it is a central point or tones interwoven into the plot. This theme has been part of science fiction in many different forms, but nothing as gripping as apocalyptic events. Apocalypse science fiction has taken popular culture by storm. This theme has moved through popular science fiction like a wave. The theme of human society failing and the survivors fighting for their lives in what remains is all over television, movies, and novels. Even if the cause of the apocalypse is different from story to story, the general principle is the same. The end of human society has captured the attention of the modern day mind. From pandemics to catastrophic ecological events, the idea is the same. What happens to humans and the world we have created when we can no longer maintain society and its constructs? This post-apocalyptic theme is not a new theme to science fiction storytelling. It has just had a massive influx of attention from the mainstream. The number one show in the world, The Walking Dead, a band of survivors left to fend for their lives after a pandemic has swept through the world that turns people into undead zombies. Even the concept of a zombie apocalypse has been around since 1968 with George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. The premise of the world being invaded by aliens has been around for over 100 years. Author H. G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds in 1897, a story about aliens coming from outer space and destroying Earth. This essay will be examining two short stories in order to illuminate the theory of decay. Ray Bradbury's There Will Come Soft Rains, a story about an automated house in the year 2026 left to struggle for its existence after humankind has wiped itself out in a nuclear war. The other, Speech Sounds by Octavia Butler, is about a woman traveling through Los Angeles after a massive pandemic has left people unable to speak. Whether or not they are new stories or cult classics, the general principle has remained the same. Civilization as we know it has come to an end. Humans face their extinction, and the world we have constructed is either destroyed or is left to rot. Any way you look at it, they all seem to funnel down into one collective thought. If humankind is gone or stripped of its humanity, then the constructs of society that are assumed to be permanent will begin to decay and fade back into the natural landscape. Octavia Butler wrote the short story Speech Sounds in 1983. It is a post-apocalyptic story about a woman trying to navigate through the city of LA. Her story took place in the middle of the fall of society as we know it. A major pandemic had swept through the world, leaving humans with a permanent state of aphasia. This inability to communicate inhibited people from being able to maintain civilization and its technologies. Octavia Butler was emphasizing that without language, humans could no longer function as we do now, as a unit. Language is what allows humans to convey complex ideas to one another. It has allowed humans to establish laws, create government, and form our world with technological inventions. Humans convey this knowledge to each other through language, and when language breaks down or does not match up, conflict can occur. This was well described in Speech Sounds when Rai, the main character, was riding one of the last running buses in Los Angeles and a huge fight broke out. Prior to fighting, the two men could not resolve their issue. They could only scream and grunt at each other until it escalated physically. This concept is not some far-fetched idea. This issue has been around as long as language itself. History has shown in the past that language barriers can cause world conflicts and may even result in war. These issues are occurring today with the rise of social media platforms and texting. Texting is one of the most frequently used forms of communication, but is lacking the fundamentals of language like the spoken word and writing. John McWhorter stated in his 2013 article in Time magazine that texting has been called by many literary critics penmanship for the illiterates. He went on to further explain in his article that when people write, they take time to construct descriptive sentences in order to impact the reader with an intended delivery. He stated that texting is closer to spoken word than writing. But as it turns out, texting is lacking as a spoken language. When people speak to one another, there are layers of communication happening that texting cannot capture, like tone, inflection, and body language. Words we speak can have different meanings by how we say them. These inflections that we use when speaking are missing when it is texted. Language is a human construct, and like all things man-made, if it is not maintained, it will break down. Octavia Butler used vivid descriptions of Los Angeles as an abandoned city in her story Speech Sounds. This was the scenery as the main character Rai makes her way through the city. We are exposed to a world with no order, very few running vehicles, and a landscape of abandoned buildings. Once an epicenter of human existence is now a reminder of what happens when people can no longer maintain their creations. When Octavia Butler wrote Speech Sounds in 1983, LA was not abandoned, and it is still a booming metropolis to this day. But there are large cities in America that may resemble a scene from a science fiction story. One of the largest is Detroit, Michigan. Detroit was a pinnacle of manufacturing during its peak. Now it is almost abandoned and left to rot. Detroit is suffering from what has been named urban blight. In 2005, Detroit had 139,699 abandoned homes out of 384,672, and this census did not account for all the abandoned factories. With city blocks abandoned and others littered with abandoned houses and factories, Detroit seems like a scene right out of a science fiction story. Many other places around the world suffer from this phenomenon. Whether these places have been abandoned because of lack of work, contamination, or catastrophic events, the images of these places match the imagination of apocalyptic authors. Some authors do not see the end as a slow death of plague and blight, but rather a flash, an instantaneous end to humanity. Ray Bradbury imagined the end to be quick. In his story, There Will Come Soft Rains, the end was not a slow decay. Instead, it was an atomic bomb that wiped out civilization. In the city of Allendale, California, in the year 2026, the only thing left after the blast was one automated house struggling to exist. Without any humans left, the house could not maintain its resources and finally burnt in a fire. Without humans to fix and maintain their creations, even the most technologically advanced thing will ultimately succumb to the effects of time. Pieces may fall off or break from the wear and tear of time. Others may be utterly destroyed by events of nature. If a car engine is not oiled, it will seize. If termites and moisture are not kept away from a house, it will rot. Ray Bradbury wrote There Will Come Soft Rains in 1950, a time of turmoil and great change in the world. With the invention of the atomic bomb and the end of World War II, America and the Soviet Union had started the Cold War. when duck and cover drills were performed in schools, in workplaces, and backyard bomb shelters were common, fear engulfed the nation and captured the attention of the entire world. With worry and woe so powerful, in 1947, scientists developed an algorithm to calculate the proximity to the end of the world, nicknamed the apocalypse clock. The clock has been remodeled and renamed the Doomsday Clock, but is still used to this day. With pending threats of nuclear strikes from tyrannical dictators, the invention of automated homes called smart houses, and the doomsday clock sitting between 2 and 17 minutes to complete annihilation over the past 7 decades, Ray Bradbury's science fiction story of an automated house left alone after a nuclear explosion seems less fiction and more science. Ray Bradbury named his story after a poem written by Sarah Teasdale in 1918. Sarah Teasdale had written There Will Come Soft Rains as a response to World War I. She had written this poem as more than a criticism of World War I, but rather a warning to the effects of war in general. Her warning rang out in the lines of her poem. And not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it is done. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. World War I was nicknamed the war to end all wars. With the invention of the machine gun and chemical warfare, it had taken more lives than any other war prior. There was an estimated 16 million people who died in the war. The heavy use of artillery, World War I, left many parts of the European countryside a desolate wasteland of death. With greater catastrophes than war hanging over humanity's head like the sword of Damocles, humans are still intent on self-annihilation. With over 90% of the organisms that existed on Earth going extinct due to natural disasters, humans still wage war against one another. We strip and pollute our planet, invent new ways to kill each other, and yet we see our role on this planet as permanent. Will we heed the warnings of the Cree prophecy? Only after the last tree is cut down, and the last fish is caught, and the last stream is poisoned, will you find that you cannot eat money. Can we come together as a species? If we go extinct, will it be because of natural disasters or by our own hand? It seems the question is not if, but when or how. If a giant rock falls from the sky tomorrow and wipes humanity out like the dinosaurs, everything we have created will waste away in time. The odds are more against us than in our favor, yet we see our existence and the existence of what we build as permanent. If we are to perish entirely, and another creature is to take our place, what will they see when they dig up our fossils? Will they see us as artists and poets, full of imagination, engineers and scientists capable of ingenuity? At the rate we are going, it is more likely that they will dig up NORAD, Fort Knox, or a uranium mine. They may simply see us as bald, upright apes who hoard shiny rocks in our constructed caves and murder each other over them. Humanity is a failed experiment walking the path to extinction, spinning its wheels endlessly, greasing them with oil and uranium. Lamb of God.